Welcome to Detroit, the 313, where everything is different.
It's the way you live, it's the way you walk, it's the way you talk, it's the way you act.
The D was built on violence.
They called us the Grim Reaper, looking for a life to snatch. I could go out and kill somebody and go home and take my girlfriend to dinner.
This city makes legends of gangsters.
The 10-year-old could tell you who the big drug pushers were.
And one gang, the Best Friends, reigned supreme.
If you crossed their path, it was either you rolled with it or got rolled over.
These guys probably flip more kilos than General Motors sold cars.
They know who we are with that friends. We tear this town up.
Detroit, Michigan. The heart of blue-collar America. It's the automobile capital of the world and the birthplace of Motown's R&B style. It's also home to another money-making enterprise.
The drug sellers and the pushers and the power and all the other things that go along with it.
The Motor City isn't like other places. The Bloods and Latin Kings don't run the show here. Detroit's gangland is locally run. When others try to move in, the message is clear: kill them all. To understand the city landscape, you need to start with the mile roads, which mark the distance from Detroit's center. These roads cut through the 9th Precinct on the east side, the most dangerous part of town.
The east side was the worst place around the city for drug dealing and killings.
The 9th is run by its biggest dealers, called kingpins. These OGs are known to flaunt their wealth, draped in gold and sporting floor-length furs.
It was clear by what they wore, the expensive clothes, the diamonds, what they drove, it was clear that they were drug pushers.
The money comes quick and easy. But for those living the lifestyle, old age isn't common.
There's no such thing as retirement. You know somebody sooner or later you're gonna come get you or you're gonna wind up in prison.
In Detroit, death can come through many means. But it was most likely to come at the hands of one gang, a band of contract killers called the Best Friends.
The Best Friends were the most violent gang in history of Detroit.
The gang started out as enforcers for some of the biggest kingpins Detroit has ever known. They made their reputation through their ruthlessness.
Murder was a way of doing business, and wasn't just a way to settle disputes, it was a way to settle, everything and anything.
The feds say the Best Friends murdered 80 people. Gang members say the death toll is even higher.
We were professionals. When we went to do something, we went to do it.
Nate Kraft, AKA Boone, asked to have his identity concealed. Boone was a high-paid hitman for the Best Friends and has no problem showing old photos of himself. His appearance has changed dramatically over the years. His body bears other scars, testaments to the dangers of being a best friend.
I was set on fire, also received a shotgun blast. All this was from people that didn't like me.
Boone, a former Army private first class, was responsible for teaching other gang members the skills a killer needed. He was known on the street as the Grim Reaper.
People hear about him, they like, you see the guy they call Boone, big black bald head, most of the time he got a hood or glasses on. If you see him, you know you did.
Boone lives in hiding.
I usually be in the holler. Now I got people doing me, trying to do me. that feel weird because now I gotta watch my back.
36-year-old rapper Brian Champtown Harmon grew up in the same hood where the gang started.
I grew up right directly across the street from the most notorious drug gang or murder clique, the Best Friends.
One of Champtown's neighbors was Dew. Dew asked to have his identity concealed. The boys were close growing up, but ran in two different circles.
At my age, in our neighborhood, everybody was doing the crack thing. Sitting in crack houses, selling rocks. Champ never did do that. It's where his role models were other rappers. My role models were other drug dealers.
Champtown pursued his dream of music and started hanging out with some of the city's hottest acts.
Kid Rock would pick me up. He knew the Best Friends was on my block. We drove around the city, we became friends. I mean, we became extremely close.
Dew was into the music too, but eventually he and Champtown parted ways.
In reality, we wanted the same thing, we just had a different way of going about it. He wanted the fortune and fame, so did I. But he wanted it, pursue it through the rap game. I pursued it through selling drugs.
Dew eventually graduated from dealing drugs to contract killing. He became one of the Best Friends' most prolific hitmen, implicated in at least 11 murders.
The weirdest situation in your life is to find out that one of your best friends that you grew up with since you were like a 5-year-old kid is now one of the most notorious hitmen in the United States of America.
Dew was paid 20 grand to kill, no questions asked.
A lot of times you wouldn't even know the reason. You was getting $20,000 to hit that person. So, you know, what difference do it make why? Your why was the $20,000.
The Best Friends were started by 17-year-old Terrence Boogaloo Brown and his brother, 19-year-old Reginald Rockin' Reg Brown. Boogaloo was the brains behind the operation.
Boogaloo never really trusted too many people, and then when he did say he trusts you, that's when you need to be nervous. Because most likely that fool is finna try to do something to you.
Boogaloo's vision for the Best Friends was to be the most brutal gang in Detroit, so that no one would oppose their will. He used murder as a tactic. Rockin' Reg oversaw the rest of the gang, which was charged with carrying out Boog's commands.
Reggie was psychopathic. The guy was bloodthirsty and kind of set a tone for the rest of his lieutenants.
The Brown brothers recruited a couple dozen hustler killers, including 2 of their older brothers. Before long, the gang was infamous in the D.
When people found out who you were, they would deal with you altogether differently because they would hear all the other rumors. Like, oh man, I ain't with them. I ain't gonna end up dead.
For a fee, the Best Friends would use brute force to rip off competing dealers and dope houses.
It was like, if you crossed their path, it was either you rolled with it or got rolled over.
The business model worked for a while. Then, Boogaloo realized the gang would never bank as much as the kingpins who hired them, so the Best Friends decided to expand.
If you do a hit and you make the money, then why even work for somebody else? And they could start selling drugs too.
The gang wanted to control the East Side drug trade.
Your whole goal is to get to where you selling weight. I'm getting the keys and I'm getting rid of them. You're not breaking them down, dealing with rock houses, dealing with crackheads, all that. No, you're dealing with other dealers.
There was just one problem. The Rock City already had its kingpins, who didn't want to share their territory, no matter how brutal the competition was. War became inevitable, and the Brown brothers would become the target. December 1986. Boogaloo Brown and one of his older brothers, Isrod, had just left an after-hours bar when they were ambushed.
Somebody pulled up beside them. They was in the blazer, shot up the blazer. Boo got nicked in the head. Iz got shot in the head.
24-year-old Isrod died at the scene. Boogaloo escaped with his life. The gang didn't even have a chance to plot their revenge.
All the Brown brothers went to the funeral, went out for a drink afterwards to toast their fallen brother, and walking out of the lounge, Ghost Brown was killed.
With two brothers in the grave, Boogaloo and Rockin' Reg were ready to turn Detroit into a bloody battleground, but they didn't know who ordered the hits.
When a best friend got killed, you didn't know who to blame, so that's why we would hit everybody. It was rare when we found out exactly who did the hit.
The solution: kill them all.
They got enough enemies probably to fill up the whole Tiger Stadium.
Boogaloo threw down a hit list of 40 targets, and the best friends went on a rampage.
It was going to end up with someone being shot and killed.
Detroit, home of the best friends. It's the center of a multi-million-dollar crack trade and a gangland so ruthless it changed the city forever.
The Detroit mentality is it's something else. It's something you can't buy. You have to live it. You have to be a part of it to know what's up with Detroit.
Detroit wasn't always so dark. The 1950s was a time of prosperity. America's number of car owners skyrocketed. And in 1957, Chevy rolled out its most famous Bel Air. That same year, Nate Boone Craft was born on these streets, the product of a broken home.
My sister would raise us. Matter of fact, she took care of me more of my time than my mother did. My mother had to work to bring money home in order for us to eat.
Boone quickly learned to fend for himself.
We basically hustled when we could hustle. That's all I knew from the time I was 9 years old up until now.
For the residents of the city's east side, opportunities were scarce, and racial prejudice was a fact of life.
Police department at that time was very brutal, did a lot of things that citizens did not like.
Detroit's violent crime rate remained low, however. In 1966, around 220 homicides were logged. That was about to change. July 23rd, 1967. Detroit police raided an illegal black after-hours drinking club, looking for drugs and hookers. They rounded up more than 80 patrons as an angry mob gathered outside.
As the people were being marched into the paddy wagons, someone threw a bottle. When the glass shattered, a lot of people said, "We're not going to take this anymore."
Fiery riots erupted throughout Detroit. Over the next 5 days, city streets became battlefields. President Lyndon B. Johnson sent in U.S. Army paratroopers. They arrived in trucks.
Looting, murder, and arson have nothing to do with civil rights.
Boone was 10 and watched looters ransack stores.
It was kind of fun to me because I seen people going into buildings, running out with stuff. This must be a free-for-all. So I grabbed me a buggy and I ran in there and grabbed a bunch of stuff and pushed it into my mother's basement, then ran back out, loaded up again. I did that all day long.
When the riots ended, 43 people were dead, and some 7,000 had been arrested. More than 2,000 buildings were destroyed, many never to be rebuilt. A dark curtain fell over the Motor City.
Many folk after the civil disturbance left the city. The numbers started dwindling.
Within days of the riots, many affluent white families fled. The big three automakers increased outsourcing of much of their production to other parts of the country, costing the city thousands of jobs. During the exodus, something sinister moved in.
Mysteriously, a little red capsule called heroin, penny caps, emerged in every community where there were civil disturbances.
The influx of heroin made life in Motown more dangerous. In 1973, Detroit's homicide rate spiked more than 300% to an all-time high of more than 700. Many of the killings were drug-related. That same year, Brian Champtown Harmon was born near 7 Mile and Gratiot.
It was the most cleanest. The houses was great. The grass was kept up. It was like high suburb area.
That changed as the flight from downtown spread further and further into the suburbs.
You heard the phrase, there goes the neighborhood. Those houses become vacant houses. Those vacant houses become crack houses. Those houses just become lots. Slowly but surely turned into a war zone.
Detroit's police force was going through its own decline. The city's ghetto was full of corrupt cops who escorted drug shipments and protected dealers.
We've had narcotic cops go bad. You know who tells us that they're selling dope? The drug dealer. They call us up.
Michael Lemons joined the narc squad in 1977.
Our role at that point when I came in was to make narcotic buys, get a search warrant, and prosecute them. I did it 897 times.
By 1984, crack had replaced heroin as the drug of choice.
It just wasn't, people from the inner city. You had teachers, you had people in law enforcement, and they were all over. They were using this drug, this little white rock.
All across the east side, crack houses began popping up. To avoid prosecution, the kingpins used kids to run their operations.
How old are you? 17. Go over in that corner.
When you're growing up in the east side of Detroit, or you growing up on the west side of Detroit, or you growing up from Detroit, period, anybody can make that bad turn and can't come back. It could happen to any of us.
Best Friends hitman Du started slinging when he was 15.
I used to live in crack houses. I had the crackheads cooking for me every day.
Those crack houses had built-in barriers that separated the sellers from the buyers.
They would just cut a hole in the door, and you knock on the door, and a voice from within would say, "What you want?" You go, "I want 2."
They hand their money through the slot, and we'd hand them the crack back out the slot.
With prices at $10 a rock, traffic was constant.
A crack house is 24/7. We make $3,000-4,000 a day at that crack house.
The combination of money and crack invited trouble. Du kept a constant lookout for hypes.
You always keep a gun because you never know when a crackhead gonna try to rob you.
In 1985, Terrence Boogaloo Brown and Reginald Rockin' Reg Brown recruited their older brothers and a few close friends to join them in the trade. They called themselves the Best Friends.
Your best friend ain't everybody's best friend.
The Brown brothers hooked up with 2 of Detroit's major cocaine suppliers as the gang grew. Demetrius Holloway, who was known for his old-school style, was one.
Holloway, fancy. Himself a businessman, wore three-piece suits, opened up lots of legitimate businesses to funnel drug money out of.
Maserati Rick Carter, Holloway's business partner, was one of the most flamboyant dealers in the D.
Maserati Rick was always driving the best cars, wearing the best clothes, keeping company with the best women. One of the real showmen of the era.
He owned a popular East Side car wash. Local kids like Dew idolized him.
Rick was who I wanted to be growing up. Rick, I used to see Rick every day like, man, I want to be like Rick.
Maserati Rick introduced Dew to the Brown brothers. When they asked Dew to join the Best Friends, he didn't hesitate.
I heard stories about them. I knew they had beef with everybody in the city. I knew everybody was scared of them. I would hear rumors about them killing people and all that, but I wasn't involved in, that.
Dew started selling drugs for the gang, but it didn't take long for him to start killing.
Well, the first time, I ever stepped out and did something like that, I didn't even look at it as a hit. I just looked at it as I was helping, my friends.
Holloway and Maserati Rick began supplying the gang with cocaine in exchange for protection. The Best Friends saw Rick flash his scratch. And they wanted the same luxuries. The pimped out rides, the Max Julian furs, the jewelry, the cash.
It wasn't just that we just wanted to sell a little here, a little there. We wanted more.
Until you become what they call a kilo man. There's only so much money you can make. But if you're talking about true kingpin status, you need to be a supplier.
The Best Friends knew they needed to move more weight to be true players. So Boogaloo got Maserati Rick to introduce him to his Colombian connect. The risky move angered Holloway, who didn't trust the Best Friends.
Sooner or later, they're gonna get rid of him and just run their own things because now they know who to buy the drugs from.
The Best Friends went directly to the source and cut into Holloway's market share. Their business took off, and in short order, they were making bank.
At one point, we was getting 300 keys. Now it was at 20,000 a key, $6 million. And those will be gone in 2-3 weeks.
The Best Friends were on a roll and intended to keep it that way.
Best Friend was power hungry, greedy. Once you got a little taste of money, you wanted more money and more money. You never could get enough.
Detroit, Michigan. The Motor City's drug industry is notoriously hard for outsiders to break into. The homegrown gang, the Best Friends, ruled the hood with an iron fist.
What they were doing was a murder game. You only get one shot at that. There's no second chances. There's no third chances. You get one shot.
Get up in the morning, put your vest on, put your clothes on, put your gun on. I mean, you break the law just by waking up.
The gang targeted anyone its leader, Terrence Boogaloo Brown, perceived as a threat.
There's a lot of stuff that could have put you on Boog's hit list. You could have robbed somebody that was working for Boog. You could have been a rainmaker for somebody who was beefing with Boog. He could have wanted your girlfriend.
Even other Best Friends weren't immune to Boogaloo's wrath.
If you're not loyal, if your loyalty is in question, you can be killed.
Dew was a Best Friends triggerman who says he never let his emotions get in the way of his work.
I can compartmentalize. Like, I could go out and kill somebody and go home and take my girlfriend to dinner.
It's an attitude the Brown brothers required in new recruits. Joining the gang was simple, as long as you were willing to murder.
Their initiation was that you go out and kill somebody for them. They give you the gun, go there and kill that guy.
The hits weren't always that easy. Best friend Nate Kraft, AKA Boone, helped the gang strategize.
They wanted me to set people up and be able to find them.
Boone says he found people with the help of corrupt Detroit police officers. A high-level department contact gave him the location of targets.
So I get information from them about where these people live or where they have their car registered to or their phone or where they receive their mail.
Then the best friends would stalk their prey.
We need to find out what location they're gonna be at this same time next week. So we have somebody there waiting on them.
And their victims rarely saw them coming.
We used to call it rocking them to sleep. It's like, you know, you pulling the wool over their eyes. You know, you letting them put themselves in a position so when you get ready to do it, it's easier.
Sooner or later, the best friends would put the thriller down.
We had two guys, we called them double trouble. One person would hit you in the body, which would drop you, and the other person would put the what we called the for show. It was for show, like he gonna put it on your head.
The best friends would celebrate their successful hits at Eastside clubs like Rado Lounge. They toasted with $100 bottles of champagne, but there was a strict prohibition against dope.
It was real. You seen somebody, you know, getting high. That was like a no-no. Why get high on your own supply? And those that did get high, they was like Sean.
The best friends spent their profits on tricked-out rides. They cruised the main drag on Detroit's Belle Isle, a city-owned island park that was a popular hangout.
As friends, you go through there with like 15, 20 cars, and they're all beautiful cars.
If you see a guy 19, or you see a guy 20 years old in a Blazer with custom Louis Vuitton tops with gold rims, and the car is just banging a sound system that's louder than Joe Louis Arena, you know what's going down.
The more money the best friends made, the more the heat came down. The gang found out that a federal task force made up of the DEA, FBI, and the Detroit Police Department was spotting.
I pick them up. 10 cars follow me.
The hitmen used cell phones to stay a step ahead.
That's what made it difficult to keep track of them, because they disposed of their cell phones if they thought that they were being tested.
The gang members also talked in code.
If the person, you know, was a known killer and you thought that person had a bulletproof vest on or he might have a gun, then you go with the overkill. You bring out AKs, M16s. What we call the alphabets.
The alphabets also gave them an advantage over law enforcement.
When it came to getting semi-automatic weapons, the drug dealers were always armed a lot better than we were.
The best friends' drug business was booming, thanks to their Colombian connect. And the more kilos they moved, the more brutal they became.
They wanted the money, and they took it by any means necessary. They wasn't scared of nobody.
The gang's leader, Boogaloo Brown, expanded business beyond Detroit and supplied dealers along Interstate 75.
They pretty much had, we call it the I-75 corridor, going from here to Florida, where they distributed them on the way at locations like Atlanta, Memphis, Lima, Ohio.
And when you get it from Colombia, you can sell it anywhere in the United States.
Money from those deals would be laundered through a network of small businesses. Cash would be deposited into legitimate accounts, then withdrawn by the dealers. Maserati Rick's car wash was one of those fronts.
At that time, the car wash was the center of all drug activity in Detroit.
It was a good place to go because you could drive a car in, it would be out of sight. The police couldn't see it unless they were inside. And then the car would come out and the transaction was done.
Though Maserati Rick had been an ally of the best friends, his business partner, Demetrius Holloway, was fast becoming an enemy. And his feelings were no secret.
With best friends like this, who need enemies?
Detroit, 1986. The best friends had quickly moved up the ranks of the city's cocaine trade, becoming power players almost overnight.
See, originally they were just the enforcers, but then they began to start also hitting and selling drugs too.
At first, the best friends got their cocaine from dealer kingpins Maserati Rick Carter and Demetrius Holloway. But as the gang's leaders, Boogaloo and Rockin' Reg Brown, became more greedy, they cut into Holloway's market share, and a deadly war started. In December 1986, two of the Brown brothers were gunned down just days apart. Boogaloo assumed Demetrius Holloway had ordered the shootings, and he wanted revenge.
I wouldn't say we had an open beef with Demetrius. It's that thing rocking to sleep.
The best friends bided their time while they continued to build their drug empire.
We watched people for years. You might hide 2 years, but most people are gonna let their guard down, not knowing that, okay, these guys still looking for me.
In 1988, the best friends were finally ready to strike. But before they could, the D was shaken to its core. September 12th, 1988. Maserati Rick Carter, the man who helped the best friends go from hitmen to kingpin status, was shot by another rival. He narrowly escaped with his life and landed in the hospital.
It looked like he was gonna have a full recovery. I was taking visitors.
The gunman stopped by Maserati Rick's room to pay his respects.
Some say he was dressed in an overcoat like a doctor to blend in, and walked into Carter's room and put a gun to his head and blew his head off.
Maserati Rick was buried in a $16,000 Mercedes-Benz styled casket, complete with spinning rims, working lights, and a Mercedes medallion. With his death, the best friends lost their most powerful ally. Then, in October, best friends hitman Nate Boone Craft was busted for drug possession. While locked up, Boone received word from his sister that their younger brother was dead. He had been murdered over an unpaid drug debt. Boone was shocked to be told that the man behind the hit was none other than Boogaloo Brown.
I felt total betrayal. But all that time I'm thinking, well, when I get out, I won't do Boo. I won't blow the top of his head off.
Boone wanted to retaliate, but killing his boss wasn't an option. There was, however, another way for Boone to get revenge.
But my whole thing was to set Boo up and have him go to prison by giving him up to the DEA.
Boone did the unthinkable and became a confidential informant for the feds. He returned to the streets with a new mission.
Nobody knew that he was a federal plant. Nobody knew that he was working for the feds to take down the best friends. But in reality, he was sent to take down the best friends.
The best friends' enemies were gunning for them, and Boogaloo Brown was racing to stay one step ahead. His primary target, Demetrius Holloway. November 1988. Holloway pulled into the parking lot of an East Side hamburger stand, only to be caught in a hail of gunfire.
When people heard the noise, everyone kind of hit the deck.
Witnesses told police that Holloway was shot multiple times before masked men loaded his body into the trunk of a car. Surprisingly, investigators found no blood at the scene. Something didn't add up.
Evidence you have of the bullets and maybe some shell casing.
Holloway reappeared months later, alive and well, and the truth was finally revealed.
He actually faked a disappearance, a kidnapping, to get the story on the street that he wasn't around.
The best friends were undeterred. In October 1990, someone tipped them off that Holloway would be at the Broadway department store, a landmark in Detroit's Greektown. He was standing at the cash register when two men walked in.
He had his head turned and he was with a female companion. They were talking to the person at the register, and the gunman came up behind him and shot him in the head.
Holloway died at the scene with more than $14,000 cash and a gun in his pocket. The gunman didn't take a dime.
The guy walked out and started whistling a tune and walked away. You know, cold-blooded killer.
Boone told the feds that best friend's hitman, Dew, was Holloway's executioner. Dew was never charged, and no one was ever convicted of the murder. But the heat came down on the gang, and word eventually got out that Boone was a snitch.
We had our suspicions, but then somebody say, no, it can't be. Because of his past, people were judging him and looking at him like he was still that person, but he wasn't.
In July 1991, Boogaloo put Boone in a precarious position. He offered him 20 grand to hit a rival who had killed a best friend. Boone hesitantly agreed.
I felt something is not right. That maybe they found out that I'm giving up information.
Just days later, Dew, Boone, and several other best friends spotted their target in a cab.
Everybody started shooting into this cab. The cab driver tried to take off. He got hit.
Boone was also shot.
I felt something hit me. What the heck was that? I reached my hand behind me, and I came back up with a handful of blood. How the hell I get blood on me? Then I felt some more hits. Looked down, my arm was hanging. Like, what the hell? Then I looked over, and I seen a flash. That's when I caught 357 in the chest. I woke up again. I'm in the hospital.
Boone later told the feds that Dew claimed the shooting was a setup.
He told me, man, Boo told us to do you, man. He was paranoid of you. Yeah, if you find out somebody telling you, yeah, I mean, either you're gonna kill him or you're gonna let him go send you to jail.
Boone's involvement in the ambush violated his parole. His sentence, 12 to 30 years in prison. But he still wanted revenge for his brother's death and continued to give the feds information that would ultimately break the gang.
His information is the information they used for their search warrants, for their wiretaps, everything. I mean, without him, there was no case.
Detroit's criminal underground has always been run by local gangs. But their rise is often followed just as quickly by their fall. By 1992, the best friends' plan to dominate the D's drug trade was blowing up. The contract killers turned kingpins became targets of a massive federal investigation.
The violence brings heat. The police are going to look at you when your name is involved in a bunch of murders. And they're going to take a stance that's by any means necessary, that you got to get off the streets.
The feds had a secret weapon. Best Friends hitman Nate Boone Craft. Boone was seeking revenge for his brother's murder, which was allegedly ordered by the gang's leader, Boogaloo Brown.
I felt very betrayed.
After serving time in prison on a drug possession charge, Boone snitched and told the feds everything.
I thought about it for a while, so wait a minute. Maybe I should put this fool in prison, let him get a little taste.
Thanks to Boone, federal prosecutor Bill Soyson gathered enough evidence to secure a grand jury indictment against 29 members of the Best Friends. In 1993, they filed charges on 56 counts, ranging from drug trafficking to murder. The indictment seemed to be the end of the Best Friends.
When we got done with them, either they went to jail or they were killed.
Shortly after the indictment came down, 25-year-old Boogaloo Brown, the gang's mastermind, was found dead in his underwear.
He was found in the back of a Yukon, wrapped in polo sheets, shot in the head at a hotel in Atlanta.
His brother, Rockin' Reg Brown, was later arrested outside a Manhattan car dealership. Now 43, he's serving a life sentence for second-degree murder. Today, the Best Friends leaders and their allies are still idolized in Detroit's underground.
You can go into a store in Detroit right now and you can buy a t-shirt with Maserati Rick's face on it, or Demetrius Holloway's face on it, Rockin' Reggie Brown's face on it, for 25 bucks, and they sell out.
They've also become a permanent part of Detroit's musical history. Dude's childhood friend, Champtown, lived out his dream of getting paid to be a rapper. In 2008, he was the opening act for Kid Rock's Rock and Roll Revival Tour. His rhymes are still influenced by the D's East Side.
Well, I knew a guy named Rick. He had a Maserati. Expensive clothes attract the women with the hottest bodies. You probably wouldn't believe he was buried up in his Benz. He was rocking gator boots. I just had scuffs on my tins back then. See, that was when the hustle began. But that was when the struggle began. Had to maintain my rep as the best in it. Round in, that's when Dude did his first hit.
In spite of the glamour, Dew says his bloody past is nothing to be proud of.
You don't see any successful drug dealers retired with the house on the hill, saying, hey, I quit the game, I got out. It don't happen. I mean, it's a myth. It's gonna come to an end. It's either gonna be a violent end, or it's gonna be the police coming to knock on your door at 6 in the morning.
When Dew was arrested, he cooperated with the feds in exchange for a reduced sentence. Though he's out on the streets, Dew wants no one to know that he was once a hitman who was implicated in at least 11 murders.
Who would want to be known as a best friend? Like, you tried to hide that as much as possible. Unfortunately, some people just knew who you were.
Boone was released in 2008 after 17 years behind bars. He fears his days as a snitch will come back to haunt him and is constantly looking over his shoulder. Even so, his past is still very present, and he has a plan for anyone who comes after him, including the Best Friends.
If they kill me, they kill me. There's nothing I can do, there's nothing I can say. But whoever tried, hopefully I'll be able to take them to hell with me. And I'm not going by myself. And they could count on one thing. You better make sure the first bullet count, because of that,